How can marketers audit their marketing data?
I can answer this question from a conversion tracking point of view, because really the foundation of all your results, what you're reporting on, what you see in the platforms, they do start at that conversion tracking basis. A good audit should really cover these three main points. So for the first one being, you want to make sure, is your current setup working? In the platforms, you want to make sure that you are able to report on your main KPIs, key performance indicators. You have to make sure that everything is working correctly. So for an e-com client, for example, that would be making sure that your purchases are being brought into the platforms and being measured correctly. So if you don't see purchases, if you see a zero conversion count in the platforms, that is something worth testing and auditing right away. And same goes for lead gen clients. If you're trying to generate leads through form submissions, you want to make sure those form submissions are tracking. And then the second piece of an audit is, are you following best practices? The digital marketing landscape, that whole environment, it changes over time. So making sure that you are staying up to date with the trends and making sure that you are maximizing your setup to ensure you are get all the conversions you can as much as possible. Best practices can include enhanced conversions. Same goes for server side tracking. So across the ad platforms, you'll see in Meta conversions API, or in TikTok, Events API. Really, that server side tracking piece is the industry's best standard right now. Then the third point in an audit is, okay, now you confirmed everything's working. You've confirmed you have everything you need to have a kind of future ready solution. Are there any other additional opportunities? How can you elevate your current setup to enhance your performance marketing strategy? So, using tactics such as offline conversion tracking is really key to an audit. And if you don't have offline conversion tracking set up, for example, which by the way, for lead generation clients specifically, it is a must have. And we cover that in our audits. That's just another way to elevate your current tracking setup. And yeah, definitely something to consider throughout the audit process.
And when we talk about best practices, we're
Mhm.
talking specifically about what the platforms recommend. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
What pitfalls do you see often when auditing, or what are some easy wins framed another way?
What is the end goal here? So what's important to digital marketers is our marketing driving results? You need to heavily rely on your attribution reporting. So the main tool that you see, or that you've probably heard of, is Google Analytics 4 or GA4. If you can ensure that your attribution reporting is accurate, then you can depend on those numbers to answer that question, are we driving results? But what some quick wins are with GA4's attribution reporting, there's actually some settings you can enable to ensure you are maximizing the amount of conversions you can attribute back to your paid channels. A quick setting is referral exclusions. In GA4, for example, you'll see conversions being attributed back to whatever channel a user has landed on. Another setting is making sure that your UTMs are being caught or being captured properly. GA4 heavily relies on UTMs to make sure, okay, what source did they come from, what medium, what campaign, things like that. And if throughout a user's journey or throughout a user session, if any of those UTMs are dropped or broken, then that session breaks. And then when you're talking about that endpoint journey or that endpoint conversion, if that session breaks, you can't attribute that back to the original um, channel.
My last question for you is, what is a non negotiable, or what are some non negotiables in data setup or cleanliness, if there are any?
From a data or from a conversion tracking lens as well, there are so many ways to solve a problem. And like any technical problem out there, as long as it works at the end of the day, then it's hard to say something's a non-negotiable. I'd say first and foremost, conversion event alignment. So that definition of how you are tracking a specific event is so important, because you need to make sure that that definition is aligned across all paid platforms. So say, for example, you have an event in Google Ads and then you have a completely separate event in Meta. How do you know that those events are actually the same? That's where really understanding what that event definition is has to be aligned across all the platforms in general. You'll always see a discrepancy between what Google Ads is reporting versus what Shopify is reporting, for example. They'll never match because of the different attribution models they use. But something to note is you want to expect about a 5 to 15% discrepancy between the two platforms. If you see anything above that, so if you see like a 2x purchases in Google Ads versus Shopify, it's very possible something is wrong. I do have one more
Yeah,
if you
totally.
don't
Give it to
mind.
me. Of course.
Cool. This one is more of a tactical one from a tracking lens, some more. So, if you're thinking about tracking best practices now, something we do come across with a lot of our audits is lacking historical context. So say we are doing an audit and we are seeing, hey, we see a big variance between Google Ads and Shopify, for example. Why is that? If we take a look at a Google Tag Manager, for example, we see all of the changes that are being made, how Google Ads is tracking that conversion without any descriptions, without any notes, without any event definitions on how those things are set up historically. We can never really piece together what's happening. And it's really hard to really find a solution if we don't have the historical context of the problem. So a non-negotiable here is just simple add notes. So in Google Tag Manager specifically, we do have a version history. So if you are submitting changes and you are setting up tracking, as a best practice, you should always be adding notes or adding a description on what changes you're making. Then if you ever do have to troubleshoot in the future, it's very easy to get that context versus not having the context at all. And then we're kind of in limbo for a little bit.
Well, thank you for this. I feel like we got a lot of great information.